Hey guys, Linda Votter here, and today we're going to talk about Encore Azaleas, the azalea that really took the gardening world by storm not too long ago because they rebloom and they put out more blooms more often. And while they're an azalea, they are far from traditional, superior in so many ways. If you're thinking about planting an Encore, or if you've got some Encores in your landscape and you're wondering how to take care of them, let's go through some of the most frequently asked questions one by one. So reblooming Encore azaleas versus traditional azaleas. How are they alike and how are they different? Well, I think reblooming pretty much says it all. Traditional azaleas bloom maybe 3 to 4 weeks in the spring, but Encores will bloom in the spring, in the summer, and in the fall, sometimes as long as 4 to 6 months. They are far superior in the amount and in the timing of their blooms. Secondly, they are both azaleas and they like their planting conditions a little bit on the acidic side. Don't plant them too deeply and give them an acidic boost with maybe some pecan hulls, some pine bark mulch, or some pine straw when you're planting them, and they both want really good drainage. But thirdly, and probably most importantly, if you're considering adding some to your landscape, they really want more sun, as much as 4 to 6 hours a day, or maybe some high dappled shade. But it will definitely affect the abundance and the quality of the bloom, so make sure they get adequate light. It'll give you a lot more flexibility in your planting. Make sure if you're not getting enough light that you consider maybe thinning out the tree canopy overhead or doing everything you can to ensure that they get a lot more light so they will perform brilliantly for you. Well, another frequently asked question is, when should I plant my Encores? Well, you can plant them in the spring or you can plant them in the fall. I personally think that in southern gardens, it's really beneficial to plant them in the fall. It's an ideal time. That way they get a chance to kind of really get their root system established before the heat of summer sets in. After planting, though, really make sure that you keep them watered well. You don't want them to dry out. And then how much they bloom and how quickly they bloom after you get them in the ground is going to depend on a number of different things. But it's one of the reasons that when I go to my garden center, I try to make sure that I get one that's really filled with buds. That way I know that they're going to bloom immediately after I get them in the ground. If you're transplanting them from another location, it's really going to depend on the conditions that they were growing in, whether or not they will bloom pretty heavily. And then third, I guess it's just maturity. A 3-gallon plant is obviously going to have more and heavier bloom than a 1-gallon plant. So that will kind of make a difference too. Other than that, just get them in the ground and enjoy the show. So you've got your reblooming Encores in the ground. Now what? How do you take care of them? Specifically about pruning, feeding, and watering. Well, when you first get them planted, make sure you keep them well watered. Once they get established, they are far less finicky about moisture. But when you first get them in the ground, you really want a strong root system, so make sure that you don't let them dry out. Pruning. Really, Encores have a naturally compact size and you won't need to prune them unless you really want to. If you do, then you want to do it right after the first bloom in spring to manage their size. But you might consider looking at the dwarf varieties versus the intermediate varieties and how tall they will grow before planting. Third, feeding. Again, if you have planted them correctly, they don't need a lot of supplemental feeding, but if you want to give them an extra boost, then after the first frost and maybe in late summer to encourage fall bloom, you can really give them a little bit of a feed with an organic balanced fertilizer, and that means the NPK ratio is all of the same. So basically, that's how carefree they are, requiring very little maintenance. So just go out and enjoy your Encores. if you're wondering how your Encores are going to make it through the winter, they're going to sail through winter just fine. They're cold hardy down to about zone 6 or zone 7, depending on the variety that you plant. So you may want to take that into account when making your selection. And more importantly, they're going to stay this gorgeous, deep, glossy green all winter long. Some of them may turn kind of a bronzy maroon color, equally as beautiful, but they're not deciduous and they will retain their foliage. Now, if they don't, there may be some kind of problem, leaf scorch, maybe they need a little bit more water, or maybe they need to be planted in an area that's a little bit more protected from cold blasts. And you can mitigate that a little bit by mulching them with some pine straw or some pecan hulls or something at planting time. But other than that, no problems. Well, the hardest question of all to answer might be which one of the 31 varieties, I believe, should you plant in your own garden? Well, here are some things to take into account. What's your color preference? Do you like really bright, vibrant reds or cool purples or very feminine pinks, kind of blush tones? Or do you like that classy, elegant look of all white against the gorgeous evergreen foliage? Well, take that into account and it might help you decide. Also, consider how you're going to be using them in the landscape. Are you going to use them in pots or as ground covers or maybe as a specimen plant or as a replacement for roses? Because in that case, you're going to want to select between the dwarf varieties and the little bit taller intermediate varieties, so you can check out just how large they get at maturity. But whether or not you need to plant one of these reblooming Encores in your garden, that's a no-brainer. You absolutely will want to find a place for one of these beauties in your own garden.